Good morning. My name is Bodine Sanders. I am the producer and host of Blueprints, a show that we focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, the positive aspects of DEI, interviewing leaders from across industries, and gather their perspective, positive perspective, on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today, my first guest I'm excited to have is Mr. Dr. D.I. Lee, PhD. He is certified diversity executive. He's also a certified diversity professional. He goes by Doc. We met recently and we've built a great relationship, and I thought, you know what? He would be a great person to have to discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion from a positive perspective. Dr. Lee is the Vice President of Education and Certification at the Institute for Diversity and Certification. The organization is the Society for Diversity. 22 years in the military, the United States Air Force, served as a master instructor. I'm telling you, your bona fides is incredible. Give me some more. Let's tell the audience, give me some more.
All right. First of all, it is an honor and a privilege to be on your inaugural show. I'm humbled whenever I hear the things that I've done, because it was a pure God thing. I had no intentions of joining the United States Air Force, but it became what essentially shaped me and positioned me to where I am today. As you said, I have served 22 years in the United States Air Force. I have earned my degrees while serving because the Air Force allowed me that opportunity. The experiences that I learned from Cincinnati, Ohio, specifically Lincoln Heights, coupled with my experiences in the United States Air Force, have shaped me. I came from the largest Black-owned and operated in the United States at the time. And by virtue of test scores, I was immersed in an environment where it was typical for me to be the only Black in the place. So you talk about a cultural shock and the opportunity of a lifetime. All of them were presented through that avenue of the United States Air Force. A little bit about my background education-wise. As I was telling Jerome, I have associate's degrees that I acquired through the Community College of the Air Force. And I am quick and proud to say that the associate's degree was my first success in post-secondary education. It allowed me to get my bachelor's and master's degree in workforce education training and development from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, and a PhD from Capella University in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My work with people from diverse backgrounds, from literally all over the United States, made me realize that how we are value programmed as children, given the best information we could be given by our parents, is a good foundation, but it does require us as responsible adults to stress test those things that we value most to see if they still are applicable, and does allow us to appreciate people who are not like us. You mentioned the Institute for Diversity Certification, where I am the global vice president. That was another what I call God thing. Because through the Institute for Diversity Certification, led by Leah and Derwin Smiley, president and CEO of the Society for Diversity, we focus entirely on appreciating people. We have processes that are rock solid, and we like to believe that we are difference makers because we provide effective strategies and management practices that position any business, industry, or institution for success. I hope that's enough.
Well, listen, that was a wonderful opening. My first question to all my guests will be, give me your blueprint on diversity, equity, and inclusion from a positive perspective based on your experience in the industry in which you work.
Okay. That's a very good question, and it's a very loaded question because it has a lot of tentacles. DEI reaches into every industry where there is a person. So when you speak to me about how I see DEI within the industry, it says to me, how do you appreciate a person in every industry where they're trying to be successful in the United States and around the world? To begin to understand how I see DEI in this industry, it begins by defining what DEI is, very briefly without going too in depth. First and foremost, diversity is about valuing people. People understand because we are all cut from different clay. We're all human, one race. We look differently by virtue of our geographical location from our ancestry. But with that, each of us has to be valued for the gifts and the attributes that we bring to any place where we are existing. Equity. It needs to be clearly distinguished from equality because that is what's proffered up on the hopes that allow every person to be successful. Equality gives every person the same thing. The hope is what I call behind equality is that every person can excel and succeed by given the same thing. The truth of the matter is we all have different positions in our life. And because of that, if you get, for example, if you give me $5,000 and you give Jerome $5,000 and someone gives you $5,000, but I'm $500,000 in debt, you are debt free. Jerome has $100,000 in the bank. Obviously, that $5,000 is not going to register much on the scale of my individual needs. Equity does that. When we talk about addressing individuals, we're giving them that person, that individual, their individual needs so they can be set up for success. Inclusion. True inclusion means when I walk into a place, wherever it may be, I'm given the tools I need to be accepted. I'm given the processes that are necessary for me to be successful in that place. My value is recognized and it's acknowledged by the leadership all the way down to the least person who's in that place. When we talk about seeing DEI in the industry, we're talking about every person who is capable, given the opportunity to succeed. This is not for the purpose of advantaging one and then simultaneously disadvantaging someone else, but it is talking about giving every person a fair opportunity of success. The thing that drives the equality perspective is what's called the myth of rugged individualism, which believe we all pull ourselves up by our bootstrap. And it just isn't true.
Well, thank you. That's another great opening. Here's another question for you. What's the difference between certification and certificate?
Another very good question. And I think a very pertinent question today. The reason being is there are many people who believe that certification and certificates are the same thing, and they are not. We are a company who promotes and awards certification for our certified diversity professionals and certified diversity executives. The difference between a certificate and a certification is that a certification requires focus, continuous education. For example, in our certification program, we have 16 competencies for each of those credentials, the CDP and the CDE. Through those competencies, a person is afforded foundational knowledge that allows them a foundation to discuss and advantage diversity from a perspective of appreciating people, while simultaneously positively impacting the bottom line, and that's profit. Any business that is open for a reason. Any entity that is in that business has a business case. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has a business case that cannot be appreciated through a certificate. A certificate is designed to be an episodic adventure. To say that, we're talking about it's a one and done training situation. If we're dealing with human personalities, which is complex by nature, I'm not saying it is impossible, but it is very, very difficult to deal with the complexities of human psychology, human personalities, by meeting a person one time, training them for 2 to 3 or 4 hours sometime, and expecting that to hold them and position them for success for an entire career. Certification requires you to continuously stay immersed in your field of profession with continuous learning as a necessary process. Think of it this way. Certification and licensure are things that are categorized as aspirational, which means if you are a CPA, there's a rigorous test, standardized. There's continuous education to maintain current in the field. The same thing as a physician, with which we practice, which means you're constantly finding new ways to do it. The law, the same way, continuous education through legal education. DEI through certification is in the exact same field. It requires you to stay on top of what's happening in the workplace, stay on top of changing demographics, include all of this thinking as you interact with people in a workplace to create high-performing environments. Certificates cannot do that in one fell swoop. The unfortunate thing, as I said before, is many businesses and industries believe they are getting the certification quality and they're signing up for certificates. The reason why it's often missed is these certificates are proffered by institutions and businesses whose name has credibility, but what they're offering is less. What we try to do is educate every person so that he, him, or they are informed in their decision and get what they're paying for.
Thank you for that answer. I appreciate that. I have 2 more questions, but I just came up with another one, so I'm gonna jump ahead.
I love it.
I often tell people that sports is a great example, because I wrote a book about it, about how team sports is a great way to build relationships, right? DEI is not just about race, it's about everything, right? And
Absolutely.
so sports, I always say, is the second best example. The number 1 example would be the military, right? That is, now I didn't write a book about the military because I wasn't in it. I wrote a book about my experience playing college football, right? Tell the audience from that perspective regarding the military, why DEI is a positive thing.
Let's back it up a little bit.
Okay.
First of all, the race, I'm sure you can relate, is a phenomenal read for anyone who wants to read a good book about how a person transitions with a strong warmth and work ethic to become something significant. Bo, who did play football at Villanova, was able to experience the exact same thing, if not very similar things that I experienced in the military. You're placed in an environment where every individual has to contribute to the success of the team. You realize that as a person, you have a responsibility to bring your best self to work in the military and in sports to ensure that the team succeeds. This does not mean that individual accomplishments should be placed above the efforts of the team. This is what the military teaches. This is what being on a team sport teaches you, is that every individual has to be responsible enough to be good at what they do. Understanding the greatest as far as you are concerned, as far as your neighborhood and your family is concerned. But on that team, it's the best persons. In the military, it's the best person that's fielded that day. In defense of the United States, we made sure that every person who put on that uniform in the United States Air Force wore the stripe, the insignias, were trained to the best of their ability. If not, we pulled them off of that flight line, which where I worked on aircraft. I worked on nuclear capable aircraft. At any given day, a mistake could devastate an entire base. Every person who performed on that base in my capacity could be trusted to put the team before themselves. We have a mantra in the Air Force: integrity first, service before self, excellence in all that we do. I guarantee you, in some way, form, or fashion, you on that foot have demonstrated the same mentality. It might not have been that mantra, but these are the requirements for every person who's going to be on a successful team and is concerned about the success for where they are.
Absolutely. If the goal is to win every day, meaning in practice, during the week, by the end of the week, the game, weekly against the competition, to get to a playoff or championship and continue to win, everyone has to be on the same page.
That's right.
Right? And you have to have a positive relationship, because if you have a positive relationship with your teammates, you will go and give that 110% that we all hear about, right?
That's right.
110%. Or another example will be go the extra mile. I did run track in high school. So yeah.
You did not running in preparation to go play a game in Villanova. So
right.
You ran somewhere.
Or listen, I'll even use Bill Belichick, right? Who is not liked in the Philadelphia market. Well, he coined the phrase, do your job. And I'm sure other coaches did it well, but he did it in a way where everybody remembers him saying, do your job. Do your job, right? So let's jump into the next question.
But before you run away from that,
go ahead.
Let me piggyback on something that you said I think needs to be fully embraced.
Okay.
When you talk about making your team successful, you didn't start preparing when you got there that day. You prepared every day to be the best you could be when the end of the week came for that game.
Correct.
People miss that. That's the work ethic that I pulled from your book.
Practice.
The other thing, absolutely. That's why I say what we do in DEI is aspirational, because it requires constant attention, constant practicing.
Yes.
Law, medicine, these are practices. We have to pay attention to the words that we use.
Absolutely. No question.
So I didn't interrupt you, but I want to make sure you put out there exactly what it means to be successful, what you were doing as a ball player, and what was required to get to that level.
I appreciate it. My mom and my family, dominated by women, taught me a long time ago, hang with the smart people. I'm hanging with the smart person.
Okay, I'll look for him, right? Because I want to hang with him too.
Here's my next question. It's a current event question, right? And we all know recently with the SCOTUS Supreme Court ruling regarding affirmative action, how does that impact DEI in the workplace from your perspective?
From my perspective, which I'm going to look at through a DEI lens, I like the fact that you said this show is about positive perspectives of DEI.
Correct.
The ruling by the Supreme Court, for those of us who immerse in DEI, did not come as a surprise. As I said before, we have to look at systems through people. The people who comprise the Supreme Court of the United States have a mindset that suggested what they said was an inevitability. It did not turn us down one iota. It did not depress us one iota, because we realized the gains that were made through affirmative action were positive, necessary at the time in the 60s, early 70s, because they argued the moral imperative of every person being allowed the opportunity to perform in the workplace. We built on that. We did what I call an and function. We're now about the business case. We understand that with the rulings of bodies like the Supreme Court, our work on developing the individual, positioning them with the language to articulate the value proposition that comes with every person being valued, understands that rulings like that are going to happen. It's the real litmus test to see if you're serious about what we're doing in this work. Because if you're serious about what we're doing in this work, you take what was given, show the people the positive ways that we can continue doing the work that we can from an inclusion perspective, such that when individual bodies such as the Supreme Court come face to face with every citizen of these United States, 9 compared to 365 million is small. Policies, practices, laws, they're necessary, and they change with the focus of the people. And that's our focus, keeping people positive about what we're doing, keeping an inclusive mindset at the forefront of what we're doing, providing each individual what he, she, or they need to be successful, and keeping the ball moving in the right direction.
I agree with that. And, I've since my book debuted, I've had a number of conversations, and I totally feel and absolutely believe. First of all, I believe in two things. I believe in a spiritual foundation and a sports foundation. Because the sports foundation, if you have the right teacher, meaning coaches are teachers, right? And if that teacher brings their values to the table, they're going to introduce those students or student athletes to the spiritual teachings of their foundation, because they both meet in the same intersection at times, right?
Absolutely.
So I believe athletes have a little bit more because they're taught, instead of going to one professor, student athletes have two, right? They have their traditional professor, and then they have their athletic professor. So they're being taught double the positive values, right, in order to be a good teammate, and do all the right things, right? So I believe in those two foundations. And with that, if you fall off the horse, you at least have one of those foundations to pick yourself back up, right? And straighten up, as we used to say in the South, straighten up and fly right. Right? So with DEI, for me, it's about talking about and having positive conversations and using positive examples. Again, I'm going to fall back to sports. There are great examples of folks over the years, if you want to look back in history, right? Great examples of athletes doing the right thing, being leaders, setting the example for the mass audience to see. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that. Let me piggyback on what you're saying. Again, I think what you say have a great degree of profundity, and it's easy to miss because you use what I call easily palatable language. But when you say you have people who are teaching you, there's also the situation that has to be taken into consideration, and that is this: you are learning as you are teaching. You're meeting people who have a value system. We call them biases. The brain is designed to create them because the brain creates shortcuts. As we avail of more information, we're allowed to make better decisions. Your perception of the world, those coaches, those professors who met you, through meeting you, got a chance to see a perspective that they didn't know before, something else that they can incorporate into their existence to make their lives better, while giving you something that's going to make you better. So there's constant reciprocity. That talking thing you mentioned, that communication piece seems easy on the surface if you are open to the conversation. What you and I are talking about now, because people have a hard time communicating effectively, they're calling it critical conversation. When to me, it's just regular communication. But it comes from understanding and having a base in this. We're introduced to our value systems of learning almost incorrectly. Here's a good example. There's an old saying, if you complete it, complete the same. With wisdom comes...
Uh-oh, I'm having a brain freeze.
Gotcha.
Senior moment.
Knowledge. When I say it, remember, everybody hears it.
Right.
But watch this. The way it was really written was not with age, but with knowledge is wisdom gained. That's what they're sharing with you when you go to an institution, you have a coach and a professor.
Right.
That's what they're learning from you when you walk in from Jacksonville, Florida, with a Southern mentality, with limited exposure to people who are not like the people in your neighborhood, with a abundance mindset, saying that white guy who let you sleep in his room, who told you don't go anywhere, when people look like you, said you can stay here for a minute, to make you realize there's something else I need to consider in my psychology that will give me a greater appreciation for people.
Right.
That's the conversation that we need to have. But if you don't have a abundance mindset, if you're operating from a scarcity mentality, and you believe by sharing anything you're going to lose everything, you can't be open to what you and I are calling talking about something.
Right. Wow. Powerful. Thank you,
Doc. That's what you did.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate that. Well, listen, I have one more question because we have a few minutes left. What are you hopeful for regarding DEI in the future? What are you hopeful for?
I posed the question to the CEO, Erwin, and our president, Leah, and all the other facilitators who I could speak with. I said, what would it look like if we did our job so well for 10 or 20 years that we didn't have a job? Most people say, I don't think that could ever happen. So I give them a trajectory to think along to make you realize how deeply and how much work we have to do in this DEI space. I want us to be educated and aware, conscious, cognizant, woke, to the degree that we see diversity as normal. But when we see a person that is neurodivergent, we see an opportunity, we see a perspective that we didn't consider before. We realize that when we create proactively a place for people who are not like us to be welcomed into the place without having to make adjustments, that is good for every person in that place. The only way we can get this mentality is through having an environment that is diverse. Because as much as we are aware and informed and well-read, we all have blind spots. And we can't see what those are until we surround ourselves with people who are not like us to give us that perspective. And then we have an open servant heart that can embrace those perspectives and inculcate those thinkings, those processes into our workplace, into our lives. I see DEI, when it is done correctly, as something that's going to make revolutionary change in the workplace that's not compartmentalized to the workplace. We walk around with the mentality of success and promotion and inclusion everywhere we go.
Well, thank you, Doc. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being my first guest on the Blueprints program. You are more than welcome to come back. There's lots to talk about. There's lots to accomplish. Again, you have my open invitation to come back. I appreciate you. Thank you for being here today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I am Bodine Sanders, the producer and host. And I look forward to spending time with you, bringing you positive DEI stories and DEI perspectives. Thank you.